Hi, you're watching 13th Whisper. The line between truth and terror is thinner than you think, and today we're going to cross it. Subscribe to the channel, give it a like, and share it with your friends. Some stories don't like being told. Let's begin. Some jobs come with more than just a paycheck. They come with shadows, whispers, and things that should stay locked away. This is the story of a night watchman in a small-town museum in Iowa who thought he'd found an easy gig, only to discover something that wanted to take his place. Let's dive into the nightmare of the night watchman. Ryan Burns needed a break, a real one. At 28, he'd been bouncing between dead-end jobs in Des Moines, from bartending to construction, never quite finding his footing. He'd grown up in a rough neighborhood, the kind where you learn to keep your head down and your fists ready, but he'd always dreamed of something better, a steady job, a quiet life, maybe even a family someday. But life had a way of kicking him down every time he got close. His last gig, working construction, ended when he threw his back out lifting beams, leaving him with a stack of medical bills and a bottle of painkillers he was trying hard not to rely on. So when he saw an ad for a night watchman at the Cedar Hollow Historical Museum in a small town in Iowa, he jumped at the chance. The pay wasn't great, barely enough to cover his rent and the gas for his beat-up Chevy. But the job sounded simple. Keep an eye on the museum while it was closed for renovations, make sure no one broke in, and do a few rounds each night. Ryan figured it'd be a quiet gig, a chance to catch up on sleep, maybe listen to some true crime podcasts while patrolling the empty halls, and get his head straight. Cedar Hollow was the kind of town you'd miss if you blinked driving through. Population barely 2,000, with a main street that still had a diner serving pie and coffee for $1.50, and a single stoplight that blinked yellow all night. The museum was the town's pride. A two-story brick building on the edge of town, surrounded by a sagging chain-link fence and a parking lot cracked with weeds. Inside, it was filled with artifacts from the 1800s, old farming tools, faded photographs of stern-faced pioneers, and a collection of Native American relics donated by a local archaeologist who'd spent his life digging up the fields around Cedar Hollow. Ryan's first day was uneventful, though the museum gave him the creeps even in daylight. The director, a wiry man in his 60s named Mr. Hargrove, gave him a quick tour, pointing out the security cameras, the alarm system, and the keys to the main doors. "Just keep things locked up tight," Hargrove said, his voice gruff, his eyes darting around like he was expecting trouble. "We've had some kids trying to sneak in lately, thinking it's a dare. Last thing we need is some punk breaking a display case." Ryan nodded, taking the keys, his flashlight, and a walkie-talkie that looked like it hadn't been updated since the 90s. "No problem, sir," he said, trying to sound professional, though he could feel Hargrove sizing him up, probably wondering if the new guy could handle the job. Hargrove paused at the door, his hand on the knob, his expression unreadable. "Oh, and don't touch the exhibits. Some of those artifacts are older than this town. We don't want anything getting damaged or misplaced." Ryan gave a thumbs up, but Hargrove's eyes lingered on him a moment longer, like he wanted to say more before he left, the door clicking shut behind him, the sound echoing through the empty lobby. The museum was quiet that first night, the kind of quiet that presses against your ears, broken only by the hum of the air conditioning and the occasional creak of the old building settling, its bones groaning under the weight of time. Ryan set up at the security desk in the main lobby, a small space with a flickering fluorescent light, a chair that squeaked every time he moved, and a grainy monitor showing the camera feeds. 4 black and white screens that flickered every few seconds, making him squint to see anything at all. The exhibits were spread across 2 floors. The first floor had the farming tools and pioneer displays, with glass cases full of rusted scythes, yellowed letters, and a mannequin dressed in a faded bonnet and apron that looked like it might topple over if you breathed on it. The second floor housed the Native American collection, pottery with cracked edges, arrowheads arranged in neat rows, and a glass case with a medallion that caught Ryan's eye during the tour. It was a small bronze disc, about the size of a silver dollar, etched with strange symbols that looked like a mix of spirals and eyes. The kind of thing that made you feel like it was staring back. A plaque next to it read, "Medallion, circa 1700s, found in Cedar Hollow, believed to be a ceremonial object." There was something about the medallion that made Ryan's skin crawl, a feeling he couldn't shake, like it was watching him as he walked by, its symbols glinting in the dim light. He shook off the thought, chalking it up to the late hour and the eerie silence of the museum, telling himself he was just being paranoid. His first round was at midnight, his flashlight beam cutting through the darkness as he walked the halls, the wooden floors creaking under his boots, each step echoing like a gunshot in the stillness. Everything was in place. The doors were locked, the windows secure, the exhibits untouched, their glass cases reflecting his flashlight beam like dull mirrors. But as he passed the medallion's case on the second floor, he stopped, his breath catching in his throat, a chill running down his spine. The glass door of the case was open, just a crack, the medallion glinting in the faint light, its symbols almost glowing, though that had to be a trick of the eye. Ryan frowned, stepping closer, his flashlight shaking slightly in his hand, the beam trembling across the floor. "I could have sworn that was locked," he muttered, his voice sounding too loud in the silence, his heart starting to pound. He reached out, his fingers brushing the glass, and the air grew colder, his breath fogging in front of him, the chill seeping into his bones. He pulled the door shut, the latch clicking into place with a sound that made him jump, and checked the other cases. But they were all secure, their contents undisturbed. Probably just forgot to lock it, he told himself, though he didn't believe it, his mind racing with questions he didn't want to answer. He made a mental note to tell Hargrove in the morning, but as he turned to leave, he heard it. A whisper, faint but unmistakable, coming from the darkness of the hall. "Ryan." He froze, his heart pounding so hard he thought it might burst, his flashlight swinging around, the beam darting across the walls. But the hall was empty, the shadows still, the pottery and arrowheads staring back with blank, lifeless eyes. "Hello?" he called, his voice trembling, cracking on the word. But there was no answer, just the echo of his own words bouncing off the walls, mocking him. He shook his head, trying to laugh it off, though the sound came out more like a choke. "Great. Now I'm hearing things. Get it together, man." He hurried back to the security desk, his steps quick, his boots thudding against the floor, the whisper lingering in his mind like a bad dream. A splinter he couldn't pull out. The rest of the night was uneventful, but Ryan couldn't shake the feeling that something was off, a nagging sense of dread that settled in his gut like a stone. He kept glancing at the camera feed for the second floor, half expecting to see the medallion's case open again, or worse, to see something standing there. But it stayed closed, the bronze disc sitting innocently under the glass, its symbols dark and lifeless. When his shift ended at 6 a.m., the first light of dawn creeping through the windows, painting the lobby in shades of gray, he locked up and drove to his rented room above the diner, the whisper still echoing in his ears, his hands gripping the steering wheel so tight his knuckles turned white. He didn't tell Hargrove about the case. He didn't want to sound crazy on his first day, didn't want to lose the job he so desperately needed. But he couldn't stop thinking about it. The way the medallion seemed to watch him, the way the whisper knew his name, the way the air had turned so cold he could still feel it in his bones. He tried to sleep, but every time he closed his eyes, he saw the medallion, its symbols swirling, and heard the whisper, soft and insidious. Ryan. The second night started the same. The museum quiet, the air heavy with the scent of old wood and dust, the kind of smell that clings to your clothes and never quite washes out. Ryan did his rounds at midnight, his flashlight beam steady this time, though his nerves were on edge, his senses heightened, every creak of the building making him flinch. The medallion's case was still closed, the latch secure. But as he turned to leave, he saw it. A shadow on the wall, tall and thin, with long arms that stretched too far, moving in sync with his own shadow, mimicking his every step. He spun around, his flashlight darting across the hall, the beam shaking in his hand. But there was nothing there. Just the exhibits, the pottery, the arrowheads, all staring back with empty eyes, their silence more unnerving than any sound. "What the hell?" he whispered, his voice shaking, his shadow on the wall now normal, just a silhouette of a man with a flashlight, nothing more. He backed away, his heart racing, his pulse pounding in his ears, and hurried downstairs, the whisper following him, louder this time. "Ryan, look at me." He stumbled into the lobby, his hands trembling as he checked the camera feeds, his eyes scanning the grainy screens. But the second floor was empty, the medallion still in its case, untouched. He grabbed the walkie-talkie, his thumb hovering over the button, his mind racing. Should he call someone? Hargrove? The cops? And tell them what? That he was seeing shadows and hearing voices. They'd think he was drunk or high, or just plain crazy. And he couldn't afford to lose this job. Not now. Not when he was already behind on rent. He took a deep breath, trying to calm himself. But the air was colder now, his breath fogging in the dim light of the lobby, the chill seeping into his skin, making his fingers ache. He decided to do another round, to prove to himself that it was nothing, that he was just tired, that the museum was playing tricks on his mind, that he wasn't losing it. But as he climbed the stairs to the second floor, the whisper grew louder, a chorus of voices now, all saying his name. "Ryan. Ryan. Look at me." He reached the medallion's case, and his blood ran cold. The glass door was open again, the medallion gone, the empty space in the case like a gaping wound. In its place was a reflection in the glass, but it wasn't his own. It was him. Same height, same build, same dark hair. But the eyes were wrong. Empty black voids that glowed faintly, like dying embers, and the smile was too wide, too sharp, showing teeth that were too many, too jagged. Jagged, a nightmare of a grin that made his stomach churn. "What the hell are you?" Ryan shouted, stumbling back, his flashlight falling to the floor with a clatter, the beam spinning wildly across the hall, casting shadows that danced like ghosts. The reflection stepped out of the glass, its form solidifying. A perfect copy of Ryan. But wrong. So wrong, its movements jerky, like a puppet on broken strings. "I'm you," it said, its voice a distorted echo of his own, layered with something ancient, something hungry, something that didn't belong in this world. "I'm your reflection." Ryan turned to run, his boots slipping on the polished floor. But the reflection was faster, its long fingers wrapping around his wrist, the cold burning his skin like fire, a pain that shot up his arm and made him gasp. "You touched me," it hissed, its face inches from his, its breath smelling of decay, of damp earth and rot, its black eyes boring into his, seeing every fear, every doubt. "Now, I take your place." Ryan yanked his arm free, the skin where it touched him red and raw, and ran downstairs, his boots pounding against the wood. the reflection's laughter echoing behind him. A sound that made his skin crawl, made his blood turn to ice. He locked himself in the security office, his hands shaking as he barricaded the door with the chair, the monitor showing the second floor where the reflection stood, staring directly into the camera. Its black eyes unblinking, its smile growing wider, stretching its face into something inhuman. The walkie-talkie crackled, the reflection's voice coming through, low and menacing. "You can't hide, Ryan. I'm already inside." He turned off the walkie-talkie, his mind racing, his eyes darting to the monitor, where the reflection was now gone, the hall empty, the medallion back in its case, as if nothing had happened. But he heard it. Footsteps, slow and deliberate, coming down the stairs, the creak of the wood echoing through the museum. Each step a heartbeat, each creak a warning. He grabbed a letter opener from the desk, the only weapon he could find, his knuckles white as he gripped it, his breath ragged, his chest tight with fear. The footsteps stopped outside the door, and the handle turned, the lock holding for now, but the door shook as the reflection pounded against it, its voice seeping through the wood, a whisper that felt like a knife against his skin. "Let me in, Ryan. Let me be you." He backed away, his eyes scanning the room for anything he could use, his heart pounding so hard he thought it might burst. And that's when he saw it. A small mirror on the wall, the kind you'd use to check your reflection before a meeting, its surface smudged with fingerprints. The reflection's face appeared in it, its black eyes staring at him, its smile stretching wider, the glass cracking under the strain, spiderweb fractures spreading across the surface. "You can't escape me," it whispered, its voice in his head now, filling him with images of himself, trapped in the glass, watching as the reflection took his life, his job, his name, walking among the living while he screamed in silence. Ryan smashed the mirror with the letter opener, the glass shattering with a sound like breaking bones, the reflection's scream echoing through the museum, a sound that made his ears bleed, made his vision blur with pain. The pounding on the door stopped, the air still. But he knew it wasn't over, knew the reflection was still out there, waiting, watching. He remembered the medallion, the way the reflection had come from the case, the way it had said he'd touched it, the burning cold of its grip still lingering on his wrist. "The medallion," he muttered, his voice hoarse, his throat dry as sandpaper. "It's tied to that thing." He grabbed his flashlight, his hands shaking as he moved the chair, the door creaking open. The hall silent now, the air so cold his fingers numbed, his breath fogging in front of him. He crept upstairs, his flashlight beam shaking, the whisper following him, softer now, but no less menacing. "You can't stop me. I'm you." The medallion was back in its case, the glass door closed, but the symbols on the bronze disc glowed faintly, pulsing like a heartbeat, each pulse sending a wave of cold through the room. Ryan smashed the glass with the letter opener, the shards falling to the floor with a sound like rain, and grabbed the medallion, the metal burning his skin, the whisper turning into a scream. "No, you can't." He ran to the first floor, his boots slipping on the wood, the reflection's footsteps behind him, faster now, its laughter filling the museum, a sound that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, a cacophony of malice. He remembered a display he'd seen during his tour, a collection of salt used by pioneers to ward off evil spirits, a superstition from the 1800s, the plaque explaining how they believed salt could trap spirits, keep them at bay. He didn't know if it would work, but he was out of options, his mind grasping at straws, his body moving on instinct. He grabbed a handful of salt from the display, his hands trembling as he poured it around the medallion, creating a rough circle on the floor. The reflection appearing at the bottom of the stairs, its black eyes glowing, its smile a nightmare of teeth, its form more solid now, more real, its long fingers twitching with anticipation. "You're mine!" it hissed, lunging for him, its movements too fast, too fluid. But the salt glowed. A faint white light that made the reflection scream, its form flickering, its body dissolving into smoke, tendrils of darkness writhing in the air. Ryan held the medallion over the salt, the symbols glowing brighter, the reflection scream growing louder, the museum shaking as the spirit was pulled back into the bronze disc, the light fading, the scream cutting off, the air warming, the cold retreating like a tide. He collapsed, his breath ragged, the medallion cold now, the symbols dull, just a piece of metal in his hand, its weight heavy with the memory of what it had unleashed. He locked it in a drawer in the security office, his hands shaking, his mind racing with what he'd seen, what he'd fought. The reflection's scream still echoing in his ears, a sound he knew he'd never forget. But the night wasn't over, and the museum wasn't done with him yet. As he sat at the desk, trying to steady his breathing, the walkie-talkie crackled again, a faint static that made his heart skip a beat. He stared at it, his hand hovering over the device, afraid to touch it, afraid of what he might hear. The static grew louder, and then a voice. Not the reflections, but Hargrove's, the director's. His tone clipped, urgent. "Ryan, you there? We've got a problem." Ryan grabbed the walkie-talkie, his voice shaky as he pressed the button. "Yeah, I'm here. What's going on?" Hargrove's voice crackled through, the signal weak, cutting in and out. "I just got a call from the sheriff. They found some old records about that medallion. Stuff we didn't know when we put it on display. It's not just a ceremonial object. It's tied to something dark. Something the tribes around here feared. They called it the shadow that steals faces." Ryan's blood ran cold, his eyes darting to the drawer where he'd locked the medallion, the metal glinting faintly through the crack, as if it could hear Hargrove's words. "What do you mean?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper, his throat tight with fear. Hargrove's voice was grim, the static making it sound like he was speaking from a great distance. "The medallion was used to trap a spirit, a thing that takes your form, your voice, your life. The tribes buried it deep, sealed it with rituals. But when they dug it up in the 50s, people started disappearing. The last guy who worked your shift, he vanished, Ryan. We thought he just skipped town, but now I'm not so sure." Ryan's stomach twisted, the memory of the reflection's black eyes flashing in his mind, its voice echoing. "I'm you." He swallowed hard, his hand tightening on the walkie-talkie. "What do I do?" he asked, his voice cracking, his mind racing with the thought that the reflection might not be gone, that it might still be here, waiting for another chance. Hargrove's voice was steady, but there was an edge to it, a fear that mirrored Ryan's own. "Don't touch it again. Don't even look at it. I'm on my way with someone who knows how to handle this. A guy from the local tribe, says he can reseal it. Just hold on, kid. Don't let it out." The walkie-talkie went silent, the static fading, leaving Ryan alone with the hum of the air conditioning and the pounding of his own heart. He stared at the drawer, the medallion inside, and for a moment, he thought he heard it. A faint whisper, so soft he might have imagined it. "Ryan." He stood, backing away, his eyes never leaving the drawer, his hand gripping the letter opener, his body tense, ready to fight if he had to. The museum was silent now, the shadows still, but he knew better than to trust the quiet. knew that the reflection, or whatever it was, might still be watching, waiting for its chance to strike again. He spent the rest of the night pacing the lobby, his flashlight trained on the drawer, his ears straining for any sound, any sign that the reflection was back. Every creak of the building made him jump. Every flicker of the fluorescent light made his heart race, but nothing came. No whispers, no shadows, just the endless ticking of the clock on the wall, counting down the minutes until dawn. When Hargrove arrived at 5 a.m., the sky outside a pale gray, he brought an older man with him, a member of the local tribe named Joseph, his face lined with age, his eyes sharp and knowing. Joseph carried a small leather pouch, the contents rattling softly as he walked, and he didn't waste time with introductions. "Where is it?" he asked, his voice low, his gaze sweeping the lobby like he could sense the darkness that lingered. Ryan pointed to the drawer, his hands shaking, his voice barely above a whisper. "In there. I locked it up after it came for me." Joseph nodded, his expression grim, and opened the drawer, the medallion glinting in the dim light, its symbols dark now, but still menacing, still alive in a way that made Ryan's skin crawl. Joseph muttered something in a language Ryan didn't understand, his hands moving quickly, as he sprinkled a mixture of herbs and ash around the medallion, the air filling with a sharp, earthy scent that made Ryan's eyes water. "This thing should never have been dug up," Joseph said, his voice heavy with regret, his hands steady as he worked. "It's a prison for a spirit that steals lives. The more it's touched, the stronger it gets. You're lucky you're still here." Ryan swallowed hard, his throat dry, his mind flashing back to the reflection's black eyes, its jagged smile, its voice in his head. "It looked like me," he said, his voice trembling, the memory making his stomach churn. "It said it was me." Joseph nodded, his eyes never leaving the medallion, his hands moving in a rhythmic pattern, tracing symbols in the air. "That's what it does. It takes your form, your voice, your memories, until there's nothing left of you but a shadow. Then it walks in your skin, and you're trapped. Forever." Ryan felt a chill run down his spine, his hands clenching into fists, his nails digging into his palms. "Is it gone?" he asked, his voice small, his eyes darting to the medallion, half expecting it to glow again, to whisper his name. Joseph didn't answer right away, his hands finishing the ritual, the medallion now wrapped in a piece of cloth, the symbols hidden from view, the air around it heavy with the scent of sage and ash. "For now," he said finally, his voice low, his eyes meeting Ryan's, a warning in their depths. "But these things, they don't die. They wait." Hargrove, who'd been silent until now, stepped forward, his face pale, his hands shoved deep in his pockets. "I'm sorry, kid," he said, his voice rough, his eyes avoiding Ryan's. "I didn't know. I should have checked the records sooner. I thought it was just a trinket." Ryan nodded, though he didn't trust himself to speak, his mind still reeling, his body still trembling with the aftershocks of fear. He quit that morning, leaving the keys on the desk, the medallion in Joseph's hands, the museum behind him as he drove out of Cedar Hollow, the sun rising over the fields, casting long shadows that made him flinch. The museum reopened a month later, the renovations complete, the medallion gone, removed from the collection, its case empty, the plaque taken down. But the new night watchman quit after his first shift, saying he saw a shadow on the wall, a shadow that looked just like him, but with eyes that weren't his own, eyes that glowed in the dark, watching, waiting. "So, what do you think?" Would you take the night watchman's job? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more terrifying stories. Until next time, stay safe and keep the shadows at bay. That's all for now. Thanks for listening, all the way to the end. If you enjoyed these stories, leave a like, subscribe, and share this with someone who still thinks horror is just fiction. The scariest things happen when you think it's all over. I'll see you very soon. And don't forget, check under the bed before you sleep.